Hello, this is Michael Hexter. Welcome to my Politics 2100 video cast here after a couple week hiatus. So in those couple weeks, we've seen some developments regarding this combination of bills, Build Back Better and bipartisan infrastructure bills. And I'm calling this episode Progressives Have Been Split by Biden, Pelosi, Schumer Tactics. Squad Needs Their Own Caucus. So what's happened is that the leadership of the Democratic Party, partly in desperation, partly perhaps in with some kind of Machiavellian plan behind their operations, have voted, instead of voting together on both the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the Build Back Better plan, which is also known as the reconciliation bill or the budget bill, instead of voting on those together, they have done what the corporate wing of the Democratic Party and also corporate Republicans wanted, which is to pass the bipartisan infrastructure bill and to potentially not pass the Build Back Better bill, or to gut it some more because it's already been gutted a great deal. And this has created a small schism within the Democratic caucus in that we had 6 progressives, 6 members of the squad, vote against the bipartisan infrastructure bill, as they said that they would do if they were decoupled. So we need to rewind the clock a little bit to really understand what's going on as far as I'm concerned. And it's been murky in recent days, except for now. There is some clarity that has been shown, and it's shown a tableau of dysfunction and a lack of will to really pass what Joe Biden claimed to be his campaign promises or his vision for America, which was kind of a moderate or light version of what a contemporary Roosevelt might have done, in very mild terms, and not nearly as thorough and as challenging as the first New Deal of the 1930s, and also subsequent legislation and the World War II mobilization that was led by the Roosevelt administration. So we have then, so there's been long politicking back and forth between the sort of right-wing members of the Democratic caucus in the Senate, that's Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, at least as figureheads perhaps of a larger group within the Senate Democratic caucus, and then the progressives in now some of it has been Bernie Sanders in the Senate, and then some of it is of the advocates for the what was once a $6 billion bill has now been bargained down to something like a 1.75 trillion. $6 trillion bill. Originally, actually in proposal, a $10 trillion bill, bargained by themselves down to $6 trillion, and now closer to 1.75 trillion, and not even finalized. Okay, so the problem extends back to the time when basically these two bills were split into two. Also, and as Sam Cedars pointed out a number of times on the Majority Report, the Biden administration really made a major political error if you consider it a honest actor, if you believe that they wanted to pass big picture changes via legislation and wanted to affect some substantial change in the United States through legislation over the next 5-10 years. So if you take that as a real goal, then they made big strategic errors, and the big strategic error was not to do what Cedars called on his program, the Majority Report, a hurry-up offense to get a major piece of legislation passed after the COVID relief bill was passed in January, and get it done quickly so opposition couldn't form and crystallize to the extent that it has, and so that he could push it through, and also, number two, not split it into two bills, one which is more friendly to the Republican Party, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and also to major donors and to corporations, fossil fuel corporations, and more a corporate-friendly and more right-leaning bill that was supposed to be quote-unquote hard infrastructure, though some of the hard infrastructure is in the Build Back Better bill. And so anyway, and also to go the sort of the third error that the Biden administration made, at least if we take the thesis that they were honest in their intent to pass a major piece of legislation, that they invited the Republicans almost as a first move into the White House to discuss cooperation between the Republicans and the Democrats, and on this legislation, on this vision, and out of that came this bipartisan infrastructure bill that was heavily and is heavily favoring corporate interests, and it has some parts of it. It has some electric vehicle charging in it. It has a few items in it that could be considered progressive or climate friendly, but then it has aspects of it that are climate negative or climate in terms of emissions, in terms of increasing emissions that favor the interests of the oil and gas industries. For instance, hydrogen standards that are not all green hydrogen, which would be net zero emissions or close to net zero emissions, but blue hydrogen, which has emissions associated with it that is derived from natural gas, and it creates carbon emissions or carbon dioxide emissions in the process by which it's made, and then used later in various energy, transportation, or other energy-related operations to drive electric engines or electric motors or other power-needing devices. So anyway, or just use this storage on a grid for later use in whatever use people use in that electricity on that grid. So anyway, getting out of that rabbit hole about the hydrogen, just in general, the bipartisan infrastructure bill is not a climate bill, and as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has said in the last couple of days, it's really a lock which the Build Back Better plan would open up as a key, as it's a key to create some of the benefits that are associated with reducing emissions, and also other benefits related to social programs that are included in the Build Back Better vision. So anyway, so these three errors of the Biden administration in putting out quickly, relying on speed, not splitting up the bills, and also not inviting Republicans in on the ground floor in conceptualizing those bills. All of those errors are now coming to fruition in a way, in the sense that the actual vision of or at least the progressive side of the vision that that Biden used to appeal to voters, also to get Bernie Sanders on his side, and to get progressives to do some organizing for his campaign. They've all seemed to sort of been weakened to great or almost entirely cut from this legislation. And so therefore, we now have progressives, the core of the progressive caucus in Congress, which is at least 6 Congress people have voted no on the bipartisan infrastructure bill and have created then negative press for themselves and criticism, but have stuck by the principles that they said that they would stick by in terms of bidding or voting on these 2 bills together, and also trying to keep the actual content of the vision on the progressive side, on the left side, a little bit to the left of center, so to speak, and a little bit toward more future looking than what ordinarily would come out of a large omnibus Washington bill like this. From the DC, from the current composition of the Democratic and Republican parties. So anyway, this is and I'm going to link in the description box to AOC's, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's justification for her vote, and also her interesting positioning in relationship to both the head of the Progressive Caucus, who's Pramila Jayapal. The Progressive Caucus is 50 Congress people, and so Jayapal was the spokesperson and was the public face of that in the last couple of weeks. And while AOC, who's much better known and much more widely, covered than Jayapal in general, had been keeping quiet, allowing Jayapal to be the front or the outward-facing, view or whatever of what the Progressive Caucus was thinking and doing. And so, and in my opinion, and also you see this in Cenk Uygur, for instance, on the Young Turks, has been scathing, and as has been Anna Kasparian on the same program, has been scathing with regard to how Jayapal has handled the negotiations, and really, she's been playing the team player in relationship to what appears, in my view, to be a moral and political collapse on the part of the Biden administration and also the Democratic leadership in the House and the Senate to really realize a powerful vision that might be a little bit discomforting to some of the mega donors and the big corporations that are really the constituency of the corporate Democratic Party, and also the Republican Party as well, more so even the Republican Party in some ways, or different fractions of those corporate elites and the ultra-wealthy elites. Anyway, so it appears as though, and I've been, worried and concerned that the progressives would do this, basically would cave, and it seems as though they have. And I'm glad, though, that this group of 6, Tlaib, Rashida Tlaib, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ayanna Pressley, Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman, and I think I'm leaving someone out. Anyway, so that group has resisted the demands that they conform to what sound like disingenuous arguments about and also there's some hypocrisy associated with, there was some maneuvering, which actually Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, in the video I'm going to link to, the Instagram live that she did earlier this weekend, basically that maneuvering was about trying to get this bipartisan infrastructure bill passed and just getting rid of essentially postponing or getting rid of the Build Back Better plan entirely. And so they resisted that, and there's been, the disingenuous part has been that the leadership has been pretending as though that this is a great triumph and that they have done everything that they can, and that there's no more to be done, or if not no more to be done, at least that the problems in the bill will be resolved. And meanwhile, AOC points out, for instance, in the area of lead pipes, that the amount of funding for remedying lead pipes is not enough to actually finish the job of replacing all the lead pipes in the U.S. And this is something that they feel is going to come back to bite the Democratic Party if they are dishonest with voters, and if they also don't realize substantial change for, among others, basically their communities. These are often the reps, the 6 reps that voted no, are in communities that are often left out of various social programs or various infrastructure programs, and often people of color or marginalized communities of various kinds that are left out. And they fear that because of the underfunding in this bill, and because it's been cut back because of concessions made to right-wing Democrats and to donors, essentially through those right-wing Democrats, either in the Senate or in the House, that they will disappoint once again, and it will be a disaster, politically a disaster for the Democratic Party. So I think I've given, I haven't given all the background, but enough background to then, put in a few words about what I think should happen in terms of, and how this is in part a reaction to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's representation of her position and of her, what she did and what she didn't do and what she's upset about. And I think, I think they really need to form their own caucus within maybe the Progressive Caucus or a sub-caucus, or I don't know exactly how that works within Congress, but there needs to be a squad caucus. In other words, there needs to be the left, the true left in the Democratic Party needs to be heard and needs to be courted and needs to create its own set of red lines as in pieces of legislation for which their support would either come or not come based on whether those red lines were met or not, whether those conditions were met or not. And this is the major error on the part of Jayapal and the part of the Progressive Caucus. There was no red lines, there was no clear, and I don't know if it's only Jayapal that is making this error and that she's just reflecting the general tone of the caucus, but there needs to be a harder core caucus. In other words, people who are willing to go out on a limb and willing to risk the opprobrium of the press, because the press is going to lambaste them anyway if they're not in this caucus. If they come out and say that they're going to resist the will of the Democratic Party elite, who are very favorably viewed by the press. Okay, so I think that and also in this long, about 70-minute long Instagram live from AOC, she really takes so many pains to praise and to make nice with, in my view, Jayapal and Biden and Pelosi to some degree. And I think that she needs to, or not just her, but the her and her allies need to, while not treat these people as necessarily their absolute opponents and enemies, on the other hand, they need to differentiate themselves and not be forced into the position of doing PR for them in any stretch of by any stretch of the imagination, which then they become utilized as part of a sham progressive party rather than a real progressive party. So the sham progressivism, this is some word that occurred to me, even though it's not a very original. I've been trying to figure out how to describe what kind of animal the Democratic Party is in reality, in truth, rather than in its own self, in its own flattering representation, or in the deluded ramblings of the right wing, and the fact that they call it a communist group or a socialistic group or whatever it is, that it's or ultra corrupt capitalist or whatever it is, or fascist, that kind of word tossing out labels and in any just sort of vituperative name calling, political name calling, but we need to understand, what the United States, what our political landscape looks like, and that's something I've been trying to describe over the last 2 years or so, year and 3/4 or something, because it seems to me we lack a good picture of what our political system is and where it's going, so anyway, the idea of calling, I've called it a good cop bad cop game, and I'm going to stick by that one. I think that the Democrats as good cops and the Republicans as bad cops fits how the parties work together to basically discipline popular discipline in a not such a positive way, but to resist and to defer and to frustrate in the wishes of ordinary people in government, in the functioning of government, and to stealthily then do the bidding of, or not so stealthily, but stealthily with the help of the media, stealthily do the bidding of the big corporations, the billionaires, and so forth and so on. So anyway, another way to think about the Democrats are that they are a sham progressive party, or a sham liberal party, with liberal being used in the American sense of a politically, somewhat left of center, center-left organization that is interested in, high-flown ideals about, equality and but not economically socialist in the same, or socialistic, or not quite a social democratic party in the sense of being focused on bread and butter issues so much. But anyway, but they are. So anyway, the sham being part of this good cop self-presentation of trying to, or as I called them earlier last year, a containment vessel for popular discontent. To do that, they need to create a veil or a shield around them, an appearance to the world of being better than, in moral terms, better than the Republican Party. So anyway, so the reason I don't want, I have been supporting the six that have resisted this particular effort to make the Build Back Better agenda go away, and I've been donating to them, and when I can, and just trying to support them on Twitter and so forth and so on, and written favorably about their political project. But anyway, I don't want them, and by extension me to some degree, be used as part of a sham or part of a duplicitous or deceptive appeal to the American people that they're a front, basically being a front for the corrupt machinations of Joe Biden, among other people, Joe Manchin, Kristen Sinema, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, all these people who are seem, in my view, and if you look carefully at their behavior and what they do, to be serving almost exclusively corporate interests and that interest of very wealthy individuals, and not the broad American people that they claim to represent, the broad population as a whole, and not the voters. They're not responsive to voters. They're responsive to donors, to big donors. And so I don't want the good work of people like Cori Bush, of Rashida Tlaib, of Ilhan Omar. That was the person I forgot, Ilhan Omar, and Jamal Bowman, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Ayanna Pressley. I don't want their good work to be used as a front and as a deceptive appeal to people by people like Biden and Pelosi to gull people. And the same thing, by the way, Bernie Sanders. I don't want Bernie Sanders to be used that way either, or to use himself that way, if he thinks that'll help somehow by some, he can somehow live another day and fine-tune some law or other by just, playing the game of being the front, the progressive front for this sham progressive party. So I think that they need to come out and talk openly about that they're not wanting to be used this way, that they don't want to have their good names and their good works be misused that way, and that they don't want their efforts to be public servants and to serve their voters directly. They don't want their efforts to be used that way, and they want to be serving voters, and they don't want to be serving the powerful interests that dominate Washington currently. And so it involves a strain, I think, within the party, and not simply making nice, okay? And I have feared that Jayapal makes more nice, okay, than Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. But Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, to me, and I wrote about that in a piece even before she was elected, and even very supportive piece, very positive piece about her. But I feared that she would become used, and her goodwill and her desire for change, and the desire to realize the true ideals of the Democratic Party, and let's say reaching back to Roosevelt and so forth and so on, that that would be used, or that she would in turn use herself that way. In other words, she would become part of the problem. I think she's not there at all now, but I feel like that sparing criticism, sparing her the either Biden or Jayapal, the leadership of her caucus, from what they've done and how they've botched this negotiation, sparing them does really hardly anybody any favors. Okay, and it continues the good cop bad cop routine, and the role of progressives in that good cop bad cop routine to keep on shining up the good cop credentials of the people who then just pass what favors or what creates benefit for the American people, but creates benefit largely to corporations and wealthy individuals. And so so I think that it's a tough road. I don't have the exact formulas for each of these Congress people. I'm talking about 6. Maybe other people will join them in some form or other if they stand up. And I mean, they've sort of done things as a group, but and it would mean also facing another formidable opponent, the media. The media is in itself a power, which I've discussed in other videos. The media is a independent in a way, or not entirely independent, but it cooperates with the power structures in both corporate. The media themselves, much of the media are corporations, are for-profit corporations, and much of the organizational entities are essentially a for-profit institution. And then not all of them, but some of them. And then they shape narratives. They shape how it appears to the American people what's happening, and they can turn upon people on a dime sometimes, but also even just in the long-term tendency, they can create lots of problems and create great headwind for progressives, and they have, and they continue to do that. But the honeymoons that progressives have enjoyed, they seem to enjoy. Okay, it's nice to be treated well by the press, but to take the road that I'm suggesting would mean that they would need to really either rely on progressive media alone, like Young Turks or a Majority Report, or in these times, or Democracy Now, and then to basically have their own media critique, essentially offering a media critique when they even are able to get onto shows like on CNN or on MSNBC, and really so making lots of enemies as they try to do their jobs. So and of course they can't make enemies of everybody, and they can't intentionally make enemies, but they have to, in my opinion, tell the truth. And to me, the truth is that the sham progressive party that is the Democratic Party needs to be transformed over time, and you need to call out the sham. Okay, so anyway, I've gone on a long time, and I just wanted to, partly because I haven't had an opportunity to make a video in a few weeks, but so I wanted to, and if you like this video, please like, and also if you would like to subscribe, please subscribe to my channel, and also if you have any thoughts about this particular content, please write some comments on the video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Anyway, see you then.